my co-founders and I spent 15 years innovating within financial services. And what we were really doing was developing financial technology companies and specialty lenders. And it was in that capacity that we observed a system that mediates the gathering and sharing or non-sharing of consumer data that was broken. And it was broken in a number of very meaningful ways. The first is that the system itself is not secure. We all know that post-Equifax. It's also a system that's broken in the sense that lenders that would love the benefit of sharing information among one another to prevent fraud and other types of issues are not allowed to do that for a variety of reasons. And as a result, they actually give away their hard-earned consumer data for free to centralized parties like the credit bureaus, only to repurchase it in synthesized form. The credit bureaus actually create no data, they just aggregate it and resell it. We saw a system that was broken in the sense that it has very limited transparency for both lenders and consumers. And anyone who's ever contested a credit report is likely aware of this. Similarly, we saw a system that was broken in the sense that there's a very high incidence of inaccuracy in terms of credit reports as well. We wanted to do something about that. Perhaps the biggest sort of, aspect of this that we found that was broken was that there are huge portions of the population in this country that are called or considered to be thin file. And let me explain what that means for those of you that don't know that term. Thin file means these are customers that either don't have a credit score or have a very low credit score because they have very little credit outstanding. And for those of you who have Credit Karma or anything, or have looked at your credit reports, you likely know that your credit score, which is necessary for you to interact with today's modern economy, is a function of how much credit you have outstanding and the diversity of credit you have. And so imagine for a moment that you don't have any credit. You're locked out of the system. You're caught in a vicious cycle. And so as a result, literally 45 million Americans are either thin file or no file. And therefore they have no access to credit, including affordable housing finance. And when we were building some of our near prime and other type of origination businesses, we would bump into these types of customers and we couldn't lend to them. And what's amazing in particular is that a lot of these customers live somewhere. They pay rent. They likely pay their auto insurance bills. They likely pay their FiOS bills. They probably pay for Netflix. But none of that data ends up at the credit bureaus. And yet they represent actually, a performance history. And so we thought, again, the system was broken because data exists that could fundamentally alter the access equation for housing finance. And we thought that was crazy. So at Spring Labs, we're developing a network that does two things. The first is it allows financial institutions and others the ability to exchange information directly by addressing the historical frictions that have prevented it. So it allows them to do it in a way that's secure, that's regulatorily compliant, and in a way that addresses the competitive sensitivities that were some of the historical frictions for sharing. And in the process, because it happens to use some novel technology called blockchain, it creates the incentives for much broader participation. And as a result, some of these alternate forms of data that might exist for these so-called thin file consumers, 45 million Americans, we might be able to allow lenders and or parties like Fannie Mae, frankly, the ability to finally underwrite and provide affordable housing finance for this portion of the population, which is quite large.